Welcome back everyone to another terrain tutorials video where today we're building this. My watcher in the water. With a pretty deep resin pour. Let's do it. And the first thing we're going to need to do is go shopping and purchase something like this, which is the plastic I use for the base and the surrounding edge of the resin pour, just to make sure everything stays together and does reduce the risk of bending and warping. I've then cut it into a circle of the correct size, ready for the base, and then you want to sand it. Anything that's shiny when using plastic, make sure you give it a good sand or file, just to make sure there's no smooth, shiny surfaces, to give the glue the best chance to adhere to it, and exactly the same as the resin. Now it's all nice and scratched, I've attached an MDF base with super glue, being very generous with the coating, shall we say, just to make sure it fully sticks and isn't going anywhere. I'll then attach this plastic cog thing, which I'm just using as a base to support the cardboard frame that's going to go on top of it, making sure we've got a nice beveled edge at the bottom to simulate deep water, which the watcher is emerging from. So when I've made the base, why have I used the plastic and not simply got a 120mm base? Well, there's actually two reasons for this. The first is that I want to create the effect that that pool goes deeper than what it is. The watcher's emerging from somewhere. That's not the bottom of the lake it's living in, and you want to create the effect that that sort of ominous green luminous pool of death carries on. The other reason is that when you're going to come to the stage where you're painting all of this black to make it look more like a really stunning display piece, you're not going to have to fill any of the sort of gaps in between where that base, if you are using one, sort of meets the resin. It's going to be completely crisp and clear all the way around, just making it a bit easier and a bit quicker. Using this as an example, you can see that's where the bottom of the mine shaft is. So the thin, crisp black base around the edge makes sense, it fits, and it's understandable. Now this next tip is really going to help. Resin pours are daunting for everyone, even people that have been doing it a long time. So before we even think about basing or painting or anything like that, you're going to want to get the plastic that you're planning to use to house the resin. Tightly wind it into a circle, a lot smaller than what the base is. So in the hope, in a couple of days, a week, you could even use a hairdryer to speed up the process if you wish. It's going to stay in that natural circular curvature when you unwrap it. And it should be about the size, if not a little bit tighter, which would be ideal. So it's hugging the base, be ready to go. You just need to use a little bit of tape to hold it in place, and the plastic curvature does the rest. What we're going to be working on next is the shelf. So this is what the watch is going to be sitting on, mostly submerged by the resin. So what you're going to want to do is, again, being very generous with the glue, super glue that cardboard onto the platform which you've built, which the watch is going to be on. Then get a set square, or in this case something that's square, and go around the edge, taking off a little bit at a time until you eventually get to the point where the bottom is exactly in line with the top. So when you do come to the stage to pour that resin near the end of the build, it's going to have that nice smooth finish all the way around. Now the watcher did come with some very interesting basing pieces, which obviously I'm going to take advantage of and use, and just put them on the shelf to give that better detail to it, and just move things around to make sure that they're in the position I want them to be before working on the next part, which is the tree. Now I have gone into grave detail about how to make trees in my 1 acre wood YouTube tutorial a couple of months ago, so please check that out. But to run through it quickly, you basically get the wire, bend it in different directions, making it come apart and go back together again, just to create some natural sort of variation in the trunk of the tree, the branches. Snip off the ends, straighten them, drown it in a resin based glue, and you're pretty much there. After you've done that, as you can see now, I've worked on the base. I've used a lot of browns, highlighting certain parts a little bit lighter brown to create different colours in the mud. And that's where we're going to leave that for now, because it's time to add some wood. And that may seem a little bit odd, but there's a couple of reasons for it. First of all is to reduce the amount of resin we're going to need. And the second of all is it releases air. Now that may not seem like a good thing, and at the top of the screen you can see a little circle that's just appeared in the top of the piece right next to the tree and the rock. That's underneath where the tentacles are going to sit, and it's where we're going to add the resin, and also something pretty amazing is going to happen, which we'll come to later. So now it's time to finish off the tree, which as you can see I've highlighted in different levels of brown, and we're going to add the leaves. Now I've put them in a uniform pattern and then basically added them left to right all the way along just to make it look as full as possible. And as you can see here, just applying them is relatively straightforward, a little bit of super glue on the end, dab it in and just push it into the gap. Once we've done that, we're going to be getting a very watered down PVA glue, which is basically the consistency of milk, and we're going to drown those leaves in it, top to bottom. After you've done that, I always get a bit of kitchen roll or a paintbrush and just get rid of the sort of pools of glue that haven't fully soaked into the leaves and sort of coated them all, and then leave it a couple of days to dry. During that time, I chose to add some more detail to the base with some fallen leaves and reeds. These were bought from a fish tank set of different pieces of plastic, and I've just cut them into pieces and stuck them into place. During that process, the trees had time to dry, so now it's a highlight of white, followed by a shamrock green speed paint, which wasn't quite dark enough, so I went over it again with camo cloak just to dull it down a little bit, and it really has made them nice and vibrant. Now the problem with the reeds is that they're plastic and they look like it. So we're going to use a desolate brown from the bottom and pull the paint towards the tip, leaving that shiny little piece right at the very tip to simulate the light coming through the water and kissing them. Around 3 or 4 days has gone by and that tightly wound plastic is ready to be unwound, and this is what we're left with. Pretty much perfect around the base and only a very small part at the very top that needs to be super glued into place. Now when adding the plastic around the base, always leave yourself a little bit extra. This is so from underneath, as you can see in this picture, we've gone with a very generous amount of PVA all the way around and left it a good couple of days to dry. Then it's time to think about adding the resin. Now when you put in the housing around the exterior of the base to hold the resin, you're going to want to add, or keep should I say, about 2 inches, something like that, going below the bottom of where your base is. So there's the bottom, the plastic's going to come to about here. Now the reason for that is stability mainly, to stop that plastic warping and bending and moulding when it gets hot and moving around. Having it protrude below the bottom of the base just makes it more sturdy. The other good thing you can do, which is the advantage of my piece, is the reason I've gone for this shelf made of cardboard going black all the way around. So that's actually created a sort of support, even though it doesn't look like it, because when the plastic's trying to move or bend, it's got that cardboard pretty much smack bang in the middle of it, which doesn't seem a lot, but it is, especially when it's got things like glue and stones and rock and basing material all over it. So it's just another way to support the process, and also looks pretty cool when it's finished. But apart from that, that's why we're doing it. And when you do come to the stage where you're going to be adding the resin, have the bottom of the base sitting on something. So you're seeing in that last picture, there's a blue cup. I just used a bit of double-sided sticky tape. The base sits on it. So the sides, which are actually going to be supporting the resin from coming out, are freestanding. They're floating above the ground because that cup or paint tin or pot or cup or whatever it is you've got the base sitting on is supporting the full weight of the miniature and the resin. And I've just found that to be the best way. It limits the sort of shrinkage and movage of the side of the resin. And I mean, that's a good sort of 3 inches deep resin. So it's relatively deep, but as you can see, the sort of finish on it is perfect. Let's see what happens next. So the resin I use is epoxy resin, and it's the Love Fen brand in this case, and you just mix A and B together in equal proportions, stir it well for 5 minutes, and then I've just added a couple of drips of shamrock green to get that nice, ominous, dark, dingy colour, which I think fits perfectly. Now you can see there's a lot of air bubbles, and what I've tried to do is grab them with a toothpick and just drag them and move them so they're touching up against the watcher to simulate the sort of froth and bubbles as it's coming out. And then around the edge you just use a hairdryer, and then you'll see the bubbles as they heat up, they'll just pop and disappear. Now at the beginning of the video we cut a hole, and that was right underneath where the tentacles were going to sit, and this is where we pour the resin to begin with that fills up that lower compartment. Now the magic's happening, and that wood is releasing bubbles, millions and millions of them, and there's only one place they can escape, which is directly underneath those tentacles. While this is taking place, get a straw and just blow them everywhere. Blow them all into the rocks to sort of simulate the effect of the waters come up on the shore, being dragged up by the massive body with the watcher, and it's all just gently coming back in again, creating that froth and adding even more realism. And the hard work's almost paid off. All we've got to do now is remove the plastic around the resin, which we're going to do next. But before that, make sure you've put this somewhere safe to dry, 24 hours minimum. Make sure it's got something over the top of it to stop dust, debris, or anything accidentally falling on it or knocking it. I've got 3 daughters and they would literally be like, to try and touch it with wet resin would be an absolute catastrophe. So somewhere safe. And then the next day, let's get that plastic off. Hair dryers out again, high heat, low speed, hold it quite close, and that plastic will just go very loose and floppy, and you'll be able to just grab it with the pliers and keep twisting and it will just pull away. The good thing about using PVA on the bottom is it will just peel off, so you get a nice crisp finish at the bottom. Around the sides, if there are any imperfections, fill them with a bit of super glue in kitchen roll or whatever it may be, and then just do a nice thin watery black coat of paint over them. This is just to show any imperfections, which you could always add a bit more glue to, file down, and just rinse and repeat that process until you've got that nice crisp clean finish. Taking your time obviously on the parts where the resin is meeting the base, because that needs to be crisp, and eventually you end up with something like this. And there we go, guys. Tutorial completed. Washer in the water, resin pour, done and finished. As always, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, send this to someone you think it's going to help. Apart from that, see you on the next one.